Imani! Julian Vance's voice cracked, a whisper lost in the Waldorf's glittering chaos as his eyes locked on his pregnant ex-wife, Imani Adebayo, deftly fixing a microphone at his own wedding. 8 months after their bitter divorce, her swollen belly and fierce resolve unravel his world, stirring guilt and unspoken longing. In this gripping tale, a billionaire's quest for redemption collides with a woman's fight for authenticity, weaving a raw emotional journey through broken vows and fragile truces. Will they rebuild their fractured bond, or is this a fleeting reunion? If you love stories that tug at the heart, don't forget to like and subscribe for more captivating tales. Stay tuned for the next chapter. The air in the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria hummed with anticipation, a taut string plucked by the weight of wealth and expectation. Julian Vance stood at the altar, his jaw tight, his charcoal suit a second skin against the scrutiny of New York's elite. His hands clasped behind him, fingers twitching as if reaching for a problem to solve. Across from him, Amelia Sterling's ivory gown caught the chandelier light. Her smile, a polished blade, sharp, precise, untouchable. Their vows were moments away, a transaction of future sealed in logic and ambition. But Julian's chest harbored a quiet ache, a whisper of doubt he couldn't pin down like a glitch in his perfectly coded world. The officiant, a silver-haired man with a voice like velvet, raised the microphone. Dearly beloved. A sharp screech tore through the room. The mic crackled, then died. Murmurs rippled across the pews, silk dresses shifting, cufflinks glinting as heads turned. Julian's brow furrowed, his mind already calculating solutions. Check the battery, trace the wire, when a figure emerged from the side of the room. Her steps were swift, purposeful, her black uniform stark against the opulence. Imani Adebayo, her belly swollen under the fabric, moved with a grace that belied her burden. She knelt by the altar, fingers deftly untangling wires, her breath quick, a bead of sweat tracing her temple. Her eyes dark and resolute, never left her task. Julian's pulse stuttered. His vision narrowed, the crowd fading to a blur. Imani. 8 months since their divorce, her name still a bruise on his heart. Her curls were pinned back, but one strand clung to her cheek, defiant. The pregnancy, undeniable, unmistakable, clawed at him. Whose child? His mind raced, equations unraveling. The last night they'd shared, her tears, his cold silence. Had there been more he'd missed? The officiant cleared his throat as the mic hummed back to life, but Julian's gaze stayed locked on Imani, her hands steady, her focus absolute, as if the room didn't exist. Julian? Amelia's voice, soft but edged, cut through. Her green eyes followed his, narrowing slightly. He forced a nod, his throat dry, but the officiant's words felt distant, a script he couldn't follow. Imani stood, brushing her hands on her apron, and slipped back into the shadows of the staff. The room exhaled, the ceremony resuming, but Julian's world tilted. Her presence wasn't chance. It was a crack in his carefully built facade, a variable he couldn't solve. The officiant's voice rose. Julian, do you take Amelia? Julian's hand shot up, silencing him. His heart pounded, a drumbeat drowning out reason. He turned to Amelia, her face a mask of calm curiosity. I can't, he said, the words raw, scraping his throat. Gasps punctured the silence, forks clinking against plates. Amelia, you deserve someone who's all in. I'm not that man. His voice cracked, not from guilt, but from the truth he hadn't faced until now. Imani's shadow lingered at the edge of his vision, a ghost he couldn't ignore. Amelia's lips parted, but no anger flared. She tilted her head, her gaze flicking to Imani, then back to him. A faint smile curved her mouth, not bitter, but knowing. I see, she said, her voice steady, a quiet power in its restraint. She stepped back, her heels clicking on the marble, and walked down the aisle, her posture unbroken. The crowd parted, stunned, as she exited without a backward glance. Julian's breath caught, her composure sharper than any rebuke. He hadn't expected this. Her dignity, her exit, a mirror to his own failure. He stood alone at the altar, the weight of eyes pressing into him, his fingers curled into fists, nails biting his palms. Imani was gone, vanished into the service corridors, but her presence burned in his chest. Had she seen? Did she care? The questions churned, each one a spark in a growing fire. He'd built his empire on logic, every deal, every decision calculated. But this wasn't a boardroom. This was Imani, the woman who'd once painted his world in colors he couldn't name, now carrying a child that might be his. Or wasn't. The uncertainty gnawed, a beast he couldn't tame. He stepped off the altar, ignoring the whispers, the cameras flashing like vultures circling. His assistant, Marcus, appeared at his side, murmuring about damage control, but Julian waved him off. "Find her," he said, his voice low, urgent. Marcus hesitated, then nodded, disappearing into the crowd. Julian's eyes scanned the room, landing on the spot where Imani had stood, her hands steady, her resolve a silent rebuke to his chaos. He'd walked away from her once, his pride a wall between them. Now she was here, in his orbit, rewriting his script. His phone buzzed. Texts from investors, a missed call from his PR team, but he ignored them. His mind replayed Imani's movements, the curve of her wrist as she fixed the wire, the set of her jaw, the weight she carried, literal and otherwise. Guilt coiled in his gut, not just for today, but for every day he'd chosen ambition over her. Their last fight flashed, her voice breaking. "You don't see me, Julian. You never did." He'd dismissed it, called her dramatic. Now, her absence screamed louder than her words ever had. He pushed through the crowd, their murmurs a dull roar. The ballroom's grandeur felt hollow, its chandeliers mocking his unraveling. Outside, the city pulsed, indifferent. Imani was out there, a truth he couldn't ignore. Had she known he'd be here? Was this fate or a cruel accident? His hand grazed the ring in his pocket, meant for Amelia, now a weight he didn't want. The future he'd planned, logical, perfect, lay in shards. And at the center of the wreckage stood Imani, her shadow stretching across his heart, demanding answers he wasn't ready to face. Julian's office was a fortress of glass and steel, the Manhattan skyline sprawling beyond the windows like a chessboard he'd mastered. But today, the view mocked him. His phone vibrated incessantly, reporters, investors, Amelia's lawyer, all clawing for a piece of the chaos he'd unleashed at the Waldorf. His tie hung loose, a noose undone, and his fingers drummed the desk, betraying the calm he projected. Imani's face haunted him, her steady hands on that damn microphone, her eyes that didn't meet his, her belly a question mark he couldn't solve. He'd told Marcus to find her, but hours had passed and the silence was a blade, twisting in his gut. His inbox chimed, a new email cutting through the noise. Not from Imani, but from a law firm representing Dreamweavers, her event company. The subject line was cold: demand for compensation, contract breach. His jaw tightened as he scanned the text. The firm detailed losses from the canceled wedding, vendor fees, staff hours, and reputational damage to a fledgling startup. The sum was modest by his standards, but the tone was unrelenting, professional, devoid of her warmth. Imani wasn't begging for his help. She was holding him accountable. His chest constricted, not from the demand, but from the realization. Imani wasn't the broken figure he'd imagined after their divorce. She was a force building something from nothing, just as he had. He leaned back, his chair creaking, and pictured her in that uniform, her movements precise, her resolve a wall he'd never breached. The email wasn't a plea, it was a gauntlet. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, itching to respond, to fix this with a check, a call, a solution. But her silence at the wedding, her refusal to look at him, burned hotter than any words. "Marcus," he barked, his voice sharper than intended. His assistant appeared, tablet in hand, eyes wary. "What do we know about Dreamweavers?" Marcus tapped the screen, rattling off details. A small Brooklyn-based event firm, co-founded by Imani and her friend Lena, gaining traction for creative, intimate gatherings. "They're good," Marcus said, "but new. A hit like this could sink them." Julian's throat tightened. He'd sunk her once, hadn't he? Late nights at the office, missed dinners, her dreams of a family dismissed as not the right time. Now she was fighting for her own empire, and he'd cost her again. He typed a reply, his fingers deliberate. "I'll cover all damages. Wire instructions to follow. I need to meet Imani Adebayo, not as a client, but as the father of her child." He hit send before doubt could creep in, his pulse racing. Father. The word felt foreign, a weight he hadn't earned. Was it his? The math checked out. 8 months since their last night, her tears soaking his shirt, his refusal to bend. But why hadn't she told him? His hands clenched, nails biting his palms. She didn't need him. That was the truth that stung most. Across town, Imani sat at a cluttered desk in Dreamweaver's office, a converted loft with exposed brick and half-finished sketches pinned to the walls. Her laptop glowed, Julian's email stark against the screen. Her breath hitched, fingers trembling as she read his words. Father. The audacity of it, after he'd walked away, after he'd chosen his empire over her heart. She leaned back, her hand resting on her belly, feeling the faint kick of the life within. "He doesn't get to claim you," she whispered, but her voice wavered, betraying the crack in her armor. Lena burst in, her braids swinging, her eyes sharp with concern. "You saw it? He's paying up, but meet him. Imani, you don't owe him anything." Imani's lips pressed thin. "I don't," she said, but her fingers lingered on the keyboard. The money would save Dreamweavers, keep their dream alive. But Julian's request wasn't about money. It was about her, about the child she'd carried alone. Her throat burned, memories flooding, his promises under starlit skies, his absence when she needed him most. She typed a response, her words clipped. Payment accepted. Meeting scheduled. My office, tomorrow, 10 a.m. She hit send, her heart pounding, a mix of defiance and dread. Julian's phone pinged, her reply a jolt through his veins. Tomorrow. He stood pacing the office, his reflection a ghost in the glass. He'd expected her to dodge, to hide, but this was Imani, unyielding even now. His mind flashed to their last fight, her voice raw. "You don't choose me, Julian. You never will." He'd let her walk out, his pride a cage. Now she was demanding he face her, not as a savior, but as a man who'd failed her. His fingers grazed a photo on his desk, him and Imani, younger, laughing in a park. He'd kept it, a relic of a life he'd buried. He called Marcus. "Clear my morning. I'm going to Brooklyn." Marcus raised an eyebrow but nodded. Julian's gaze drifted to the skyline, the city's pulse mocking his own. Imani wasn't just a memory. She was a reckoning. He'd built his world on control, but her presence, her child, their child, was a variable he couldn't predict. His hand trembled not from fear but from the weight of what he might find tomorrow. Answers or rejection, redemption or ruin. In her loft, Imani closed her laptop, her breath uneven. Lena watched, arms crossed. "You sure about this?" Imani's eyes flicked to a sketch on the wall, a half-finished sunrise, its colors muted. "No," she admitted, her voice soft, "but he's not the only one who gets to decide what happens next." She touched her belly, the baby's kick a quiet promise. Tomorrow she'd face Julian, not as the woman he'd left, but as the one she'd become. The air thickened with the weight of what was coming, a collision of past and present, of logic and heart, that neither could escape. The Dreamweaver's office smelled of coffee and turpentine, a cluttered haven of creativity that made Julian's skin itch. He stood in the doorway, his tailored jacket out of place among the mismatched furniture and pinned-up sketches. Imani sat behind a desk strewn with fabric swatches and event proposals, her belly straining against her blouse, her eyes guarded but sharp. The air between them crackled not with romance but with the weight of 8 months apart, of words unsaid and wounds unhealed. Julian's fingers twitched, craving a spreadsheet to tame this chaos, but Imani's stare pinned him like a moth to a board. "Sit," she said, her voice cool, professional. She slid a document across the desk, its edges crisp. "These are my terms." Julian sank into a creaking chair, scanning the pages. No financial demands, no alimony. Instead, a list. Respect her parenting choices. No unsolicited gifts. Shared decision-making for the child. His jaw tightened. She wasn't asking for his money. She was demanding his presence. His throat burned, the word father from his email echoing like a dare. He wasn't sure he could meet. "You're serious about this?" he asked, his voice low, testing. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of fire. "You think I'd waste my time otherwise?" She leaned forward, her hands clasped, knuckles whitening. "This isn't about you, Julian. It's about my child. My child, not ours." The distinction cut, a blade slipping under his ribs. He wanted to argue, to demand clarity. Was it his? But her posture, rigid and unyielding, silenced him. She was a fortress now, built from the rubble he'd left behind. He cleared his throat, flipping to the last page. "A trust fund," he said, his tone measured. "For the baby. $5 million to start. Education, health care, security." Imani's laugh was sharp, a sound that stung. "You think money fixes everything, don't you?" She pushed the document back toward him. "My child needs a father, not a bank account. Someone who shows up." "Can you do that, Julian? Or is this another deal you'll close and forget?" Her words landed like blows, each one unearthing memories. Her waiting at home, his phone buzzing with boardroom calls, her dreams of a family dismissed as later. His fingers tightened on the paper, creasing it. "I'm not that man anymore," he said, but the words felt hollow, untested. Her gaze didn't waver, searching his face for a lie. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "I want to be there, Imani. Every appointment, every milestone. I'll build the damn crib myself if you let me." Her lips parted, a breath escaping, but she didn't speak. He pressed on, reckless, and counseling, for us, as co-parents, not to fix the past, but to make this work. For the baby. His heart pounded, the offer raw, a leap into territory he didn't know how to navigate. Imani's fingers stilled, her eyes flicking to the sketches behind her, a burst of color, a life she'd built without him. "Counseling," she repeated, her voice soft but edged with disbelief. "You in a room talking about feelings? That's new." The jab landed, but her lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. For a moment he saw the old Imani, the one who'd teased him under starlit skies, her laughter a melody he'd forgotten, but it vanished as quickly, her face hardening. "Why now, Julian? Why care now?" His throat tightened, her question a mirror to his own doubts. He saw there last night, her suitcase by the door, his voice cold. "If you can't handle my life, maybe you shouldn't be in it." He'd let her go, his pride a wall. Now, her belly, her strength, her refusal to bend, it unraveled him. "Because I failed you," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't see you then. I see you now." His hand shook, betraying the control he clung to. "If that's my child, I want to be more than a signature on a check." Imani leaned back, her hand resting on her belly, a protective shield. The baby kicked, a faint ripple under her blouse, and her eyes softened, just for a second. "You don't get to walk back in and claim us," she said, her voice steady but quieter. "But I won't keep you from trying for the baby's sake." She scribbled a note on the document, sliding it back. "First appointment's tomorrow, 2 p.m. Don't be late." The words were a challenge, a line drawn in the sand. Julian nodded, his chest tight with something he couldn't name, hope or fear. He stood, the chair scraping against the floor. "I won't," he said, meeting her gaze. Her eyes held his, searching, but she didn't reply. He turned to leave, his hand lingering on the doorknob, her scent, jasmine and paint, clinging to the air. Outside, Brooklyn buzzed, but his world narrowed to her words, her terms, her strength. He'd built empires, but this was different. This was Imani demanding he show up, not just pay up. In the loft, Imani exhaled, her fingers trembling as she touched the document. Lena appeared leaning against the doorframe. "You okay?" Imani nodded, but her heart raced. She'd faced him, set her rules, but his words, "I see you now," echoed a crack in her defenses. She glanced at a sketch of a half-finished sunrise, its colors muted. "He's not getting in that easily," she murmured, but her hand lingered on her belly. The baby's kick, a reminder of what was at stake. Tomorrow he'd be there, or he wouldn't. Either way, she'd be ready. Her heart a battlefield, her resolve a shield. Julian's Bentley purred through Manhattan's Upper East Side, the city's pulse a dull hum against his racing thoughts. Imani sat beside him, her arms crossed, her gaze fixed out the window. Her silence was louder than any argument, a wall he couldn't breach. The ultrasound appointment loomed tomorrow, but today was their first test, shopping for the baby. Julian's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, his mind mapping the plan. Bergdorf's baby boutique, curated, safe, perfect. He'd already called ahead, ensuring a private session. Control was his language, but Imani's quiet defiance spoke another. He pulled up to the boutique, its windows gleaming with bespoke cribs and cashmere swaddles. Imani's brow arched, her lips tightening. "No," she said, her voice clipped. "We're going to Carter's on Flatbush. It's practical." Julian's jaw clenched, but he nodded, redirecting the car to Brooklyn. Her choice, a discount store, grated against his need for certainty, for the best. The air between them thickened, charged with the same tension that had fractured their marriage, his logic, her heart. Inside Carter's, fluorescent lights buzzed, casting harsh shadows on racks of onesies and strollers. Imani moved with purpose, her fingers grazing a simple blue blanket, her belly shifting under her sweater. Julian trailed her, his polished loafers out of place on the scuffed linoleum. "This one," he said, pointing to a high-tech stroller, its price tag a small fortune. Crash-tested, ergonomic, top safety ratings. Imani's eyes flicked to it, then away. "It's a tank," she said, her tone dry. "I'd rather get this." She held up a used stroller from a clearance rack, sturdy but worn, its price a fraction of his choice. "You can't be serious," Julian snapped, his voice sharper than intended. Her gaze met his, unflinching. "I am. It's safe, affordable, and doesn't scream I own the world." Her words cut, a reminder of every fight. His penthouse upgrades, her thrift store finds, his absence when she'd craved connection. His chest tightened, the aisle closing in. "Affordable doesn't mean safe," he countered, his hands gesturing to the used stroller. "Oh, what if it breaks? What if—" He stopped, her stare ablade. "You don't trust me," she said, not a question, but a verdict. "You never did." The accusation landed, heavy as stone. His mind flashed to their last anniversary, her waiting in a dress she'd sewn herself, him stuck in a boardroom, texting apologies. He'd thought money could fix it, jewelry, trips, But she'd wanted him, not his wallet. Now her hand rested on the clearance stroller, her posture defiant, a mother protecting her world. "I trust you," he said, his voice low, raw. I need to know the baby's safe." Her eyes softened, just a flicker, then hardened again. "Then listen to me, Julian. Stop trying to buy safety." Their voices rose, drawing glances from shoppers. A couple nearby, two men, one with a tattooed arm, the other cradling a stuffed giraffe, paused, watching. Julian's face burned, but Imani didn't flinch, her hand now on a pack of cloth diapers. "These," she said, tossing them into the cart. "Sustainable, gentle on the skin." He scoffed, pointing to a display of premium disposables. "Those are faster, cleaner. Why make things harder?" Her laugh was bitter, sharp. "Because life isn't your boardroom, Julian. It's messy. It's real." The tattooed man chuckled, stepping closer. "You two know we spent 5 years and every dime we had just to get to argue over a stroller?" His partner grinned, nudging him. "Enjoy it. Means you're in it together." The words hit like a shockwave. Julian's breath caught, his argument dissolving. Imani's hand froze on the cart, her eyes wide, reflecting the same jolt. The couple moved on, their laughter fading. But the moment lingered, a mirror to their absurdity. They stood silent, the aisle a battlefield of unspoken truths. Julian's shoulders sagged. He looked at the clearance stroller, its worn frame suddenly less offensive. "Fine," he said, his voice softer. "Your pick, but..." He grabbed a cashmere blanket from a nearby shelf, its price obscene, and dropped it into the cart. "For the baby." Imani's lips twitched, a reluctant smile breaking through. "You're impossible," she muttered, but her tone held a warmth he hadn't heard in months. Their eyes met, a fleeting connection before she turned away, pushing the cart forward. They checked out, the cashier's chatter a blur. Outside, Brooklyn's evening buzz enveloped them, horns and laughter mingling with the weight of their truce. Julian carried the bags, his arm brushing hers as they walked to the car. She didn't pull away, but her silence spoke volumes. His mind churned. Her words, "You don't trust me," echoed with their past. He'd failed her, chosen control over connection. Now this small compromise felt like a crack in his armor, a step toward something he couldn't name. Imani glanced at him, her hand on her belly, the baby's kick a secret she didn't share. "Tomorrow's the ultrasound," she said, her voice neutral. "Don't be late." He nodded, his throat tight. "I won't." As he opened the car door for her, his fingers lingered on the handle. Her jasmine scent stirring memories he'd buried. The city lights blurred, a canvas of possibilities and regrets. Tomorrow he'd see their child, or hers, on a screen, a truth that could bind or break them. For now, the cashmere blanket in the bag was his olive branch, fragile but real. In a war, he was only beginning to fight. Julian stood in Imani's Brooklyn apartment, the air thick with the scent of old books and linseed oil. The space was a kaleidoscope of her soul, scattered sketch pads, half-burned candles, a clay mug with a chipped rim. His polished shoes sank into a threadbare rug, and his hands, still raw from wrestling with crib screws, felt foreign here. Imani leaned against the counter, her belly a quiet curve under her paint-splattered shirt, her eyes tracking his every move. The crib box lay open, a challenge he'd promised to meet, but the weight of her gaze was heavier than the task. He knelt, fumbling with a screwdriver, his pulse uneven, her silence a pulse of its own. "You sure you don't need the manual?" Imani's voice was dry, teasing, but her arms stayed crossed, a barrier. Julian's lips twitched, a reflex to her old banter, but he shook his head. "I've got this." He didn't. The crib's frame mocked him, bolts slipping from his fingers, his knuckles grazing rough wood. Her apartment was a world apart from his sterile penthouse, each corner alive with her, her art, her chaos, her life without him. His chest tightened, a pain he couldn't name, as he slotted a panel wrong and cursed under his breath. She stepped closer, her shadow falling over him. "Here," she said, kneeling awkwardly, her hand brushing his to adjust the panel. Her touch was brief, electric, gone before he could react. Their eyes met, hers guarded, his searching. "You always did hate manuals," she muttered, a ghost of a smile fading fast. He wanted to reach for her, to bridge the chasm of 8 months, but her posture, rigid, protective, stopped him. Instead, he focused on the crib, his hands moving faster as if building it could rebuild something else. The silence grew heavy, broken only by the clink of screws. "This place," he said, his voice low, testing. "It's you." Her brow arched, skeptical. "Meaning?" He gestured to the clutter, a poetry book splayed open, a vase of wilting daisies. "It's alive, messy, real." Her lips parted, but she didn't reply, her fingers tightening on a crib rail. He pressed on, reckless. "My place. It's empty. Always was." The admission slipped out, raw, and her eyes flickered, a crack in her armor. She stood, brushing her hands, her breath uneven. "You chose that," she said, her voice soft but sharp, a blade wrapped in velvet. He nodded, his throat tight. "I did." The crib took shape, but his mind wandered to their old apartment, her laughter filling it, his late nights stealing it away. He'd built an empire while she'd built a home, and he'd let it crumble. His gaze snagged on a corner of the room, a canvas draped in dust, its edges curling. A sunrise, half-painted, colors bleeding into shadow. His breath caught. "That's ours," he said, standing, his voice barely a whisper. "Our last anniversary." Her face froze, her hand grazing her belly, the baby's kick a secret she didn't share. "Why didn't you finish it?" he asked, stepping closer, the crib forgotten. Her eyes darted away, her fingers trembling. "I couldn't," she said, her voice small, raw. "After you left, the colors, they were gone." Not an accusation, but a truth, sharp enough to cut. His chest caved, her words a mirror to his failure. He saw it now, her alone, brush in hand, staring at a canvas she couldn't touch, his absence a thief. "Imani," he started, but she shook her head, stepping back, her hand raised like a shield. "Don't," she said, her voice breaking. "Don't make this about you." He froze, his hands useless at his sides. The crib stood half-built, a fragile promise in a room thick with regret. "I'm not," he said, his voice low, urgent. "I'm trying to understand." Her laugh was brittle, a sound that stung. "Understand? You didn't see me then. Don't pretend you can now." But her eyes betrayed her, glistening, a war between strength and pain. He wanted to reach out, to hold her, but the canvas stood between them, a testament to what he'd broken. His fingers flexed, itching to fix it, but this wasn't a deal to close. She turned away, busying herself with a stack of sketches, her shoulders tight. "Finish the crib," she said, her voice steady again, a command. He nodded, kneeling back down, his hands moving mechanically. The screwdriver slipped, nicking his thumb, a bead of blood welling up. He ignored it, his mind on her words. The colors were gone. He'd taken more than her love. He'd stolen her light. The crib's final piece clicked into place, but the victory felt hollow, her silence louder than any applause. He stood wiping his hands, his eyes lingering on the canvas. "I'll be at the ultrasound," he said, his voice firm, a vow. She nodded, not looking at him, her hand still on her belly. "Good." The word was clipped, but her fingers trembled, betraying her. He stepped toward the door, his heart a knot of guilt and resolve. Outside, Brooklyn's dusk wrapped around him, the city's hum a faint echo of her pulse. Tomorrow, he'd see their child, a flicker of life on a screen. But tonight, the unfinished sunrise burned in his mind, A challenge he couldn't ignore. A chance to bring the colors back. Or lose her forever. The Manhattan Cafe buzzed with the clink of porcelain and the murmur of power lunches, but Julian felt like he was drowning. He sat across from Amelia, her tailored blazer a stark contrast to the chaos in his chest. Her green eyes, sharp as ever, studied him over the rim of her coffee cup, her calm a blade he didn't know how to parry. He'd come to apologize, to close the wound he'd opened at the altar, but her presence, poised, unshaken, made his rehearsed words feel flimsy. His fingers gripped the table's edge, the memory of Imani's unfinished canvas still burning. Her words, the colors were gone, a weight he couldn't shake. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low, raw, "for the wedding, for everything." Amelia's lips curved, not a smile, but something softer, sadder. She set her cup down, the clink deliberate. "You don't need to apologize, Julian," she said, her tone even, no trace of venom. "I saw it coming. Not Imani, maybe, but the way you were, half here, half somewhere else." Her words landed like a quiet punch, his throat tightening. He'd expected anger, tears, anything but this. Understanding. He leaned forward, his hands clenching, the cafe's hum fading. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, his voice cracking. "I thought I was doing the right thing." Amelia's brow arched, her gaze piercing. "The right thing for who? Me? You? Or her?" The question hung, sharp, and his mind flashed to Imani's apartment, her trembling fingers, the sunrise she couldn't finish. He'd hurt them both, his logic a wrecking ball through their lives. His jaw tightened, a bead of sweat tracing his temple. "I don't know," he admitted, the truth bitter. "I thought I could fix it all." Amelia leaned back, crossing her arms, her posture a study in control. "That's your problem, Julian," she said, her voice low, deliberate. "You treat love like a problem to solve, a deal to close. Imani, she's not a spreadsheet, she's a poem." Her words sliced clean and deep, echoing Imani's own accusations. He saw it now, his late nights, his promises of later, his need to control every outcome. His chest ached, the cafe's air too thick to breathe. "A poem," he repeated, his voice barely audible, testing the weight of it. Amelia nodded, her eyes softening. "Just a fraction. You can't solve a poem. You feel it, or you lose it." His hand shook, the napkin under his fingers crumpled. He saw Imani's canvas, her guarded eyes, her belly shielding a life he might claim but hadn't earned. Amelia's words were a mirror, reflecting his failure, not just with her, but with Imani, with himself. "I didn't see her," he said, his voice raw, a confession. "Not then. I'm trying now." Amelia's gaze held his, searching, then softened further. "Then try harder," she said, her tone firm but not unkind. "She's worth it. So's the kid." The mention of the baby jolted him, his pulse spiking. Amelia knew, maybe not the details, but enough. He swallowed, his throat dry. "You're not angry?" Her laugh was soft, almost wistful. "I was. But I'm not you, Julian. I don't hold on to things I can't have." She sipped her coffee, her composure a quiet rebuke. "I wanted a partner, not a puzzle. You were never all in. I saw it even if you didn't." Her honesty stung, but it was clean, no malice. He leaned back, his shoulders sagging, the weight of her words settling. She was right. He'd been half present, even with her, his heart tethered to a past he couldn't let go. The cafe's chatter swelled, a reminder of the world moving on. Amelia glanced at her watch, then at him. "You've got a chance with her," she said, her voice low, urgent. "Don't waste it trying to fix what's broken. Build something new." Her words were a lifeline, but they burned, demanding he step into a space he didn't know, feeling, not solving. He nodded, his throat too tight for words. She stood smoothing her blazer, her smile faint but genuine. "Good luck, Julian," she said, and walked out, her heels clicking a steady rhythm, leaving him alone with his thoughts. He sat staring at the empty chair, Amelia's words echoing. A poem, not a spreadsheet. His mind flashed to Imani, her strength, her pain, the baby tying them together. Tomorrow's ultrasound loomed, a flicker of life on a screen that could change everything. His hand grazed his phone, itching to call her, but he stopped. She didn't need his promises, she needed proof. His fingers trembled, the weight of her canvas, her colors heavy in his chest. He'd failed her once, but Amelia's counsel was a spark, a challenge to be more than the man who'd walked away. Outside, Manhattan pulsed, indifferent to his unraveling. He paid the bill, his movements mechanical, but his mind was alive, churning. Imani wasn't a problem to solve. She was a world to enter if she'd let him. The ultrasound, the crib, the stroller, they were steps, not solutions. His heart raced, a mix of fear and resolve. He'd show up tomorrow, not with plans, but with presence, ready to feel the poem he'd once ignored. But as he stepped into the city's hum, a shadow lingered. Would Imani let him in, or had he lost her colors for good? The hospital waiting room buzzed with sterile efficiency, the antiseptic scent stinging Julian's nose. He paced, his loafers clicking on the linoleum, his tie loosened, a rare crack in his polished armor. Imani sat across from him, her hands folded over her belly, her eyes fixed on a pamphlet about birthing options. The ultrasound appointment was minutes away, but their earlier argument hung like a storm cloud. Julian had booked a VIP suite at New York Presbyterian, a team of specialists on standby. Safety, his mantra. Imani had countered with a birthing center, a quiet space with a midwife she trusted, her voice fierce with conviction. Now the silence between them crackled, a battlefield of unspoken fears. "You're still set on that place?" Julian asked, his voice low, testing. Imani's gaze flicked up, sharp as a blade. "It's not about the place, Julian. It's about trust." Her words cut, her fingers tightening on the pamphlet, creasing it. He stopped pacing, his chest tight. Trust. The word echoed their past. Her waiting for him choosing boardrooms over her heart. He saw it now, her dream of a natural birth not as whimsy, but as control, her way of claiming this moment. His jaw clenched, the urge to argue rising, but Amelia's words, a poem, not a spreadsheet, stopped him cold. "I trust you," he said, his voice softer, raw. I can't lose you, or the baby." Her eyes widened, a flicker of surprise, then narrowed. "You don't get to say that now," she snapped, her voice trembling. "Not after you walked away." Her hand grazed her belly, the baby's kick a silent pulse. He stepped closer, his hands useless at his sides. "I know," he said, his throat burning, "but I'm here. I'm trying." She looked away, her lips pressed thin, but her shoulders softened. Just a fraction, a crack in her defenses. The nurse called her name, and they followed. The ultrasound room a cocoon of dim light and humming machines. Imani lay back, her breath uneven as the technician spread gel on her belly. Julian stood frozen, his eyes locked on the screen. A heartbeat thrummed, a tiny form flickering into view. Arms, legs, a profile so small it stole his breath. "Your son," the technician said, smiling. "Son." The word hit like a wave, drowning his logic. Imani's hand trembled, her eyes glistening, and for a moment their gazes met, raw, unguarded. He reached for her hand, then stopped, his fingers hovering, afraid to break the moment. The appointment ended, but the image lingered, a tether between them. Outside, they walked to a nearby cafe, the city's hum, a distant roar. "A boy," Julian said, his voice barely above a whisper. Imani nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. "Kai," she said, testing the name. "It means sea, strong, uncontainable." He smiled, faint but real. "Perfect." The word slipped out, and her eyes flicked to his, searching. For once he didn't push, didn't plan. He just sat, letting her name their son sink in, a promise he hadn't earned. But the truce shattered later, at her apartment, when he brought up the birth plan again. "The hospital's safer," he said, his voice rising despite himself. "They've got everything. Neonatologists, ORs." Imani's face hardened, her hands on her hips. "You're doing it again," she said, her voice a controlled burn. "You think you can control this like it's a deal. I want a midwife, Julian. I want to feel safe, not caged." Her words stung, a mirror to their past, his need to fix, her need to feel. He opened his mouth, but her glare silenced him. "Trust me," she said, her voice breaking, "or leave." He stayed, but the argument lingered, a bruise. Days later, a call came at midnight, Imani, her voice tight with fear. "It's too early," she said, breathless. "Something's wrong." His heart stopped, his car keys already in hand. He sped to her, finding her doubled over in her apartment, her face pale, her hands clutching her belly. "The hospital," she whispered, and he nodded, no triumph in it, only fear. At New York Presbyterian, the VIP suite he'd booked waited, but as nurses swarmed, he saw her panic, her dream of a quiet birth slipping away. He knelt beside her, her hand gripping his, her nails digging into his skin. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice small, a confession that broke him. Amelia's words echoed, "Feel it. Don't solve it." He swallowed his instinct to take charge, to demand answers from the doctors. Instead, he leaned close, his voice steady. "What do you need, Imani? Tell me." Her eyes met his, wide, vulnerable. "Just stay," she said, her breath hitching. He nodded, his throat tight, and turned to the doctor. "Whatever she wants," he said, his voice firm. "Make her feel safe." The doctor nodded, adjusting the plan. A quieter room, fewer interventions. Her midwife called in. Imani's grip eased, her eyes glistening with something like gratitude. Julian stayed, his hand in hers. The monitor's beeps a fragile rhythm. Kai was coming too soon, too fast, and the future hung on a thread. As Imani's breathing steadied, Julian's heart raced, not with plans, but with presence, a vow to be there, no matter what came next. The hospital's hum faded, and all he saw was her, their son, and the fragile bridge they were building, one trembling step at a time. Imani's Brooklyn apartment was a battlefield at 3 a.m., strewn with burp cloths and half-empty bottles. The air hung heavy with the scent of baby powder and exhaustion. Kai's wails pierced the silence, relentless, a tiny dictator ruling the night. Imani slumped on the couch, her curls a wild halo, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. Julian sat beside her, his shirt wrinkled, sleeves rolled up, his usual polish eroded by sleepless nights. The crib he'd built stood in the corner, a quiet victory, but Kai's cries mocked their efforts, a reminder that plans meant nothing here. "Shh, Kai, please," Imani murmured, rocking him gently, her arms trembling. She'd tried everything, feeding, changing, singing a lullaby that cracked on every note. Julian paced, his hands raking through his hair, his mind grasping for a solution that didn't exist. "Maybe he's teething," he said, his voice hoarse, desperate. Imani's laugh was brittle, a shard of glass. "He's 2 months old, Julian. It's not teeth, it's us." Her words stung, a truth they both felt. They were failing together in this chaotic new world. He stopped pacing, his eyes on her, her slumped shoulders, the way she curled around Kai like a shield. His chest ached, Amelia's words echoing, a poem, not a spreadsheet. He'd been trying, showing up for every feeding, every cry, but tonight his logic was useless. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice soft, not a demand but a plea. Imani's gaze met his, raw, unguarded. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking, a confession that mirrored his own. Kai's cries sharpened, a knife in the quiet. Julian sank to the floor, his back against the couch, inches from her. "Give him here," he said, his hands outstretched. She hesitated, her arms tightening, then passed Kai over, her fingers brushing his, a fleeting spark. He cradled the baby, his tiny body warm, trembling with sobs. Julian rocked him, awkward at first, his movements stiff. "Come on, buddy," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Give us a break." Imani watched, her eyes glistening, a mix of exhaustion and something softer, something he didn't dare name. They'd been at this for weeks, shared nights, tense days, a fragile co-parenting dance, but tonight felt different, heavier. Kai's cries softened, then spiked again, and Julian's shoulders sagged. "We're terrible at this," he said, a half-laugh escaping raw and unfiltered. Imani's lips twitched, a tired smile breaking through. "Speak for yourself," she said, but her voice held no bite, only warmth. She leaned closer, her shoulder grazing his, and for a moment the room shrank to just them, Kai's wails as a strange kind of glue. "Let's try the walk," she said, standing, her movements slow, heavy. They circled the apartment, Kai between them, their steps sinking despite themselves. The city's hum filtered through the window, a distant lullaby. Julian's arm brushed hers, and she didn't pull away. Her silence a fragile truce. His mind flashed to their past, nights like this but with laughter, her painting while he read their world small and whole. Now it was fractured, but here they were, together, failing beautifully. Kai's cries dulled to whimpers, his tiny fists unclenching. Imani's hand grazed Julian's as they adjusted Kai's blanket, the cashmere one he'd insisted on. "You and that damn blanket," she muttered, her smile faint but real. He chuckled, the sound foreign in his throat. "Worth every penny," he said, his eyes meeting hers, holding longer than they should. Her breath hitched, and she looked away, her fingers lingering on Kai's cheek. The moment stretched, delicate, a thread they could snap with a word. They sank back onto the floor, Kai between them, his whimpers fading to soft breaths. Julian's back pressed against the couch, his shoulder against hers, the warmth of her, a quiet shock. "All our plans," he said, his voice low, almost to himself, "all that prep, and here we are, clueless." Imani's laugh was soft, tired. "I told you," she said, her tone teasing, but her eyes held his, searching. His hand moved, hesitant, then rested on hers, not a grab, but a question. Her fingers didn't pull away, but they didn't curl into his either. "I'm here, Imani," he said, his voice raw, a vow, not to fix it, just to be here. Her eyes glistened, a tear slipping free, and she didn't wipe it away. "I know," she whispered, her voice trembling, "but don't make promises you can't keep." The words were a warning, but her hand stayed under his, a fragile bridge. Kai stirred, his tiny hand brushing Julian's thumb, and the world stilled. They sat, silent, the city's pulse a backdrop to their own, three hearts, beating together, messy and real. The night stretched on, Kai's breath evening out, but neither moved. Julian's thumb traced a slow circle on her hand, and she let it. Her silence a possibility, not a rejection. His heart pounded, not with plans, but with presence, a poem he was learning to feel. Tomorrow they'd face another day, diapers, cries, the ultrasound's echo of Kai's heartbeat. But tonight, this moment, was enough. A family fractured but mending, bound by a love that refused to fade, held together by a touch at 3 a.m. In a whirlwind of shattered vows and raw truths, a billionaire and his ex-wife navigate guilt, redemption, and the fragile hope of rebuilding a family. Their journey, woven with clashes of logic and heart, reveals that love is no equation but a poem felt in sleepless nights and quiet touches. Thank you for joining us in this emotional odyssey. Your presence means everything. Please subscribe to our channel for more gripping tales of the heart and stay tuned for the next story that will keep you captivated. Until then, keep feeling the poetry of life.